I think that, everyone is really, a lot of people are dealing with just so much change and uncertainty right now. We've had a lot of change and unpredictability over the last few years with Brexit and COVID, and now there are supply chain issues, economic uncertainty, war in Ukraine. There's a lot of other issues going on, and each business is really handling their own set of unique challenges. And when I'm talking to clients, something that just keeps coming up is these skills to navigate uncertainty, resiliency. So it's those skills that help you navigate that. And that's what we're discussing today. So I hope that by the end of this session, around midday, you'll be able to have a better idea of maybe how to become a little bit more resilient, and both for yourself as an individual, but also then in terms of a team. This is absolutely a place where you can, unmute yourself and have a chat. Just obviously we are recording it, so just share whatever you're comfortable with that will be recorded, but do absolutely interact, pop things into the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself at any stage. There will be a breakout room later, so if you can't join that, don't worry too much. I know some people might need to keep themselves muted, but if you can, then it's a great opportunity to learn from someone else. I think this is a topic that really lends itself well to just discussing, maybe someone else has a problem that you're facing that they recently solved. It's a good space to learn from each other. I was having conversations recently with a few clients, and they were all from very different businesses. But we were just chatting about the challenges that they're facing. And, one of them just said, at the moment, we're just really existing as a business, and that's okay. I think that really kind of stuck with a lot of the people on the call, because again, they all had their unique business, they're all unique challenges that other people wouldn't have been aware of. But that was something that came up a bit, just trying to keep your head above water at the moment. And just for context as well, I saw this headline. It's an Irish Times article. You can see there, uncertainty clouds the economic outlook for 2022. And if you look there, the date of that is the 6th of February. And in that article, it mentions how Germany was in the process of signing off on a pipeline that would increase Europe's reliance on Russian gas. So obviously that plan has been suspended. Russia invaded Ukraine then on the 24th of February. So I think that just shows how quickly things are changing. This article that's not even, just about a month old, and it's talking about all the uncertainty, it doesn't even fully capture how quickly things are changing. So we're all really existing in that environment. Each person on the call probably has their unique challenges. And even if, say, for some of you, things might be going quite well, I guarantee that at some point down the line, you're going to experience some sort of challenge or setback that you never experienced before. So these are the skills that will help prepare you to cope with that. And not only, we're talking about resilience, obviously it's important for individuals, but it's important as a team and a business. It's important to consider that in the wider context. Research found that it's almost impossible to be either highly engaged or resilient in work if you don't feel like part of a team. So in a way, one is kind of the loneliest number. It's a big factor in resiliency is belonging to a team. So that's why we're focusing on that context. As you can see there, people are 2.6 times more likely to be fully engaged, or 2.7 times more likely to be highly resilient if you are engaged or if you're identifying as a team member. So I'd be interested to hear in the chat, or you can feel free to unmute yourself. What would you be seeing if a resilient team member was part of your team? So imagine you had two employees, one of them was very resilient, the other was much less resilient. What does a resilient team member do differently that maybe a less resilient team member wouldn't do? So pop your thoughts there into the chat. What would we see? What would you notice about a person? If they were really engaged and really resilient, how would they approach their work? How would they interact with people? How would they think about work? All right, so pop your answers into the chat there. Um, and oh, just in the chat about where is this article from. So that was Marcus Buckingham. You may have heard of him. So I can share that afterwards. I can't think off the top of my head of the name of the website, but I'll share that with you afterwards. So yeah, it was Marcus Buckingham from that article. So I'm just looking at the comments coming in about resilient team members. So they'll be having more enthusiasm and probably more sales as well. Resilient team members are thinking outside the box. Yeah, so they can be flexible and be a bit creative. Connected to their peers. Yeah, absolutely, especially upwards. Yeah, thanks, Peter. So yeah, kind of not just maybe their immediate team, but lots of different networks are kind of maintaining that. Yeah, Matthias, open to learn new skills and perspectives, absolutely. And embracing challenges. Yeah, exactly, Stuart. So they're open to seeing, they know that things aren't going to always be easy, but they're up for a bit of a challenge. So yeah, I think those are all really good comments. You can feel free to keep them coming in. But yeah, exactly. So that's something that we would notice. So those are some clear benefits there of, someone who's able to be resilient and engaged, being enthusiastic, being connected to people, and so on. And we talk about, I think a lot of people are becoming more familiar with that term burnout, which you can see on this graph in front of us here. It's where that pressure is really high, and it means that performance is actually coming down. But I just wanted to put this up on the screen just to help us think, like thinking of the level of pressure and where we're currently at. We don't want people getting rusty. Bore out is another term that I've heard before, where the level of pressure is so low that performance is low as well. People are just bored. But as the pressure increases, we expect performance to increase a bit. So there's a stage where people just feel comfortable, they know what they're doing, they're quite familiar with it. And as we keep going on then into this stretching zone, that's sort of where we see optimal performance. We see that there is sufficient challenge, and there is enough of a level of pressure that people are willing to stretch themselves a bit. But then there is kind of a tipping point where people begin to feel under strain and their performance starts to decline. And if we keep going with that level of pressure, we do see people getting overwhelmed and we see burnout happening. So burnout is that state of exhaustion, basically mental and physical and emotional exhaustion, which is caused by excessive or prolonged stress. So I'm not saying, after you've had a hard day or a hard week, this is more over a prolonged period of time. Okay, so it means that people are, feeling emotionally drained and unable to meet those constant demands. And unfortunately, we're seeing it quite a lot. So that's again why, obviously, there's elements about the work design that's really important to try avoid that, people performing at that maximum level of pressure. But, to be able to be in that stretching zone a little bit, we do need to have those resilient thoughts and actions. And I mentioned thoughts and actions. There are many, many ways to combat stress. And, this webinar isn't just about going, oh, make sure you take your breaks or you do your exercise or get enough sleep. Like, we all kind of know that. It is a bit of a reminder, but, it's kind of focusing both on the thoughts and the actions. So sometimes, yeah, we need to just persevere through difficult times and have that belief that we can handle pressure. How you think about the situation, how you think about yourself, being able to have those resilient thoughts that, yeah, I can handle this. And as well as that, we need to consider what we do. What kind of actions are we taking? How are you behaving? So that, it's things like getting enough sleep, eating well, managing how much caffeine you're taking in, taking some breaks from work, getting physical activity, spending time with friends and family, even just relaxing. Like, all of those things can help restore our energy so that we have the energy to deal with challenges. It's often things that we know, but we don't always do. So I think it may be worth even just reflecting for yourself. Are you neglecting one or the other? Is there, do you spend a lot of time on the resilient actions, but when it comes to, thinking about stress or setbacks that you feel overwhelmed, or you try to avoid stress? Or is it a case that you're constantly plowing through, you have those resilient thoughts, but you're not taking the breaks, or you're not restoring your energy with the resilient actions? And so it's worth considering, do you pay more attention to one over the other? Just a couple of examples, if we're thinking resilient thoughts, what a resilient person might be thinking. I'm open to hearing new ways of doing things. So that flexibility that we mentioned in the chat. I've got through challenges like this before, so going, I know it's tough, but we did it. We got out the other side. We're going to get through it again. And even things like knowing your values or your purpose, that can really help you get through challenging times or setbacks as well. In terms of resilient actions, it might just be, putting these things into your diary or into your schedule. For example, I'm going to meditate, and then I'm going to be in bed for 10:30, or I'm going to speak to my partner about my problem. Just voice your concerns, or maybe I'm going to finish work at 5 p.m. today, and I'm going to go for a run, and making that kind of a non-negotiable. So it's just realizing that, neglecting any of these, there is a cost to it. So if you're saying yes to, working late, what are you saying no to? So it's just, being aware of that you are making that choice. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of set the scene a little bit in terms of, resiliency, and thinking about both the thoughts and actions, because the mindset is really important as well as what you do. But what I've created is a framework that will help you or your team to become a little bit more resilient. And it's just got a couple of areas that you may want to be thinking about. So I've identified these 6 C's that an individual or a team can consider when it comes to improving their resilience. And what I would recommend, if this is something that you want to work on, is you may like to, get your team together and go through how you're going to ensure that you are working on all of these 6 C's. So maybe what strategies are you going to implement? What, actions are you going to take? And what mindset do you want to encourage? So I'm just going to go through these bit by bit. If you do have any questions or anything like that on it, do absolutely pop it into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. But I'm just going to go through each of them and kind of show you what it might look like, right? So we'll start up here with change. That's the first one that I have there. So this is that ability to be flexible in your thoughts and behaviors. So we mentioned that in the chat as well. Naturally, we tend to prefer our tried and tested methods. We'd like to find evidence that supports our existing beliefs, and we tend to ignore evidence that goes against them. But it's really important to realize that there's always a different method or a different approach that you can take to a problem or a setback. So this skill is about being flexible in your thinking and maybe seeing challenges a little bit differently. For example, rather than it being a disaster, see it as a learning opportunity. All right, so changing how you frame something will help you change how you approach it, and it'll help you become a bit unstuck, because we can get stuck in our thinking if we're thinking in the same way. But it's also about being flexible in your actions, so changing maybe a process that may have worked for years, but maybe it's no longer the best possible process or solution. And again, that can be really difficult to do. But because of the pace of change, it's really important for you and your team to be constantly looking for ways to improve. So I've got that quote there that if you have a hammer, you look at every problem like it's a nail. We often say, okay, I have this solution, or I have this way of thinking, let's look at it through that lens. But this is that skill of being able to step outside of that. Moving over then to control, okay, which is the second C there. So this is about focusing on what you can control and influence. I just want to throw a question out there. Does anyone know what you are advised to do if you were swimming in the sea and you get caught in a rip current? Anyone want to pop any suggestions into the chat? So we're getting a bit of information on resilience, but we're also getting some sea safety tips. We're really expanding it. So anyone, any ideas? of what you're meant to do. So Peter, yeah, you're saying don't panic, don't fight it. Absolutely. Yeah, so remain calm. Don't just fight against it. And yeah, Stuart, swim parallel to the shore. So exactly. So if you are swimming and you are caught in a rip current, the advice is, as you say, Peter, not to try and just swim against it. You'll tire yourself out, you'll make no progress. But instead, you're advised to stay calm and swim parallel to the shore so that you get out of the current. And I just like to keep that kind of metaphor in my head because some things are out of your control, like the power of the sea, right? You can fight against it all day long and you're not going to win. But that doesn't mean that we can't do anything to help ourselves. You don't have to just go, oh, well, I'll just hope for the best, hope someone rescues me. But actually, no, we can find a way around it. So that's true in our work and our personal lives. I can't control another person. So if I make my goals about, that dependent on how another person needs to change, I'm probably going to exhaust myself and become frustrated. If you spend all your time talking about, COVID-19 or war, you might tire yourself out. And again, it's not that those things aren't important, but it's about being mindful of your energy and how much time are you focusing on things that you can't control, and how much time are you spending on what is within your control, or even what is within your influence. So what can you influence? So if you hear your team or yourself saying things like, we have no choice, I would absolutely challenge that, and recognize that you do actually have other options. Maybe you don't like your other options, maybe they're not desirable, but believing that you have no choice will lead you to feelings of despondency and disengagement. So realizing there are alternatives and take ownership of the choices you make. So what's within your control as an individual? You can control your behavior, your actions, your reactions. And what can you influence? You can have an influence over your reputation or what people think of you. You can't control it, but you can do things that influence it. You can influence where you work, whether you get promoted. Again, it's not completely within your control, but you have influence over it. And then recognize that some things are outside of your control, even though they may be of concern to you. So it's just, again, managing your energy in terms of how much time am I spending focusing on what is completely without my control. And in terms of developing this, if you're a leader of a team, it's about giving out kind of tasks that are challenging, but within their capabilities as well. And asking them, is there anything in your way to completing that task successfully? And if you are a team member, try to determine, do you have enough resources to control the outcome of a situation? And if not, figure out where those gaps are, make efforts to close them. Do you need to upskill? Do you need to get new resources? Whatever you need to do, just figuring out how to close that gap so that things become more within your own control and within your influence. So then we're moving along over to this third C, which is challenge. And this skill, it's basically about being up for a challenge. So the mindset involves meeting stressful life events head on and embracing the chance to grow from adversity. So people using this skill, they are able to accept that change and challenge are a part of life and they don't expect it to be easy. So I think, Stuart, you mentioned that at the start, being up for a challenge. So it's that belief that, maybe you're not there right now, but you might just not be there yet. So if you put the time and effort in, you'll be able to respond to the challenge, you'll be able to succeed or improve the situation. Okay, so people who are using this, instead of just reacting to challenges with defensiveness or negativity, it's about mindfully responding to a challenge. And think about your own mindset. Like, do you view stress as something that is always unhelpful and should be avoided? Because if so, you're constantly trying to avoid it. It kind of doesn't really matter how much yoga or meditation you do, because change and setbacks are inevitable. So this is more about just being willing to tackle it, not pretend that it's not happening. So I have in there a growth mindset, trying to, believe that your abilities aren't fixed. And if you put enough time and effort in, that you will succeed. And I've got this quote here that I quite like is, experience is a hard teacher because she gives the test first and the lesson afterwards. So we learn from those setbacks and those challenges. So seeing it as that opportunity to grow and develop ourselves. Moving on then to the fourth one, which is commit. With this one, I picture a sat nav, right? So I'm sure most of you have used Google Maps or some kind of sat nav in the car before. Now, if I wanted to just go for an aimless drive, it's not much use. There's no point in using Google Maps because I don't know the destination, right? So we need to know where we're going, first of all, for a sat nav to be useful. We need to define the end goal, right? And once we have that, we can pop the destination into Google Maps and it'll tell us how to get there. But have you ever done this? I definitely have, where you've put the destination in and you start driving along, and after a while, maybe you switch on to autopilot and you suddenly realize, oh, I've been driving going to work. I don't need to go to work, or you suddenly realize you've missed a turn a while back. Why does that happen? Because focusing on those instructions requires a level of attention, right? So we've put the destination in. The device can tell us where to go, but if we're not paying attention to it, it doesn't work. So it's really similar to how we find our direction in life and in work. First of all, we need to define the purpose. We need to say, where do we want to go? What does success look like? We need to begin with the end in mind. And that's great. A lot of companies will have their targets. But once we find out where we need to go, we need to then consciously pay attention to how to get towards that goal. And I think that's especially important with goals that are maybe important but not urgent. For example, building relationships or making time for continuous professional development, as all of you have done today. So it's not always easy because it's not as urgent as other things, but it is important. And so going back to that sat nav analogy, you might get there in the end, you might get to your goal, but if you're not really paying attention to it, you can end up just getting lost or, taking a longer route to get there. So with a clear goal and clear values, it's a lot easier to get through adversity, so really defining your purpose and act in line with that. And I think when a team is using this really effectively, you'll see them having high motivation, high confidence, high self-belief. Okay, so clarifying and working towards those goals and those motivators. The fifth one then is connect. I think this could also be called care. And this piece is really about utilizing the power of relationships, both in terms of solving problems, working together to find solutions, and also in terms of support and connection, which is really important for actually feeling better when it comes to dealing with setbacks or adversity. So the aim here is to create strong, trusting relationships, ones that are mutually satisfying or mutually beneficial. So it's really important to be present and try to, connect with people, whether that's even just through your body language or expressing gratitude, and showing empathy by active listening. So I think that, sorry, I've just clicked on by accident there. Go back there. So I think that, sometimes we think of a resilient person as being someone who's very strong and independent and they never need to ask for help. I would say that, I would challenge that and say that a real resilient person is someone who knows that they don't have to do everything on their own. They know that they can let their guard down and they can ask for help. I think that's a really common area of development because I met plenty of people who are really competent, really high performing leaders. Maybe they're managing the well-being of a large team, but they never turn to someone else for support for their own well-being. They're the person that everyone comes to with their problems and they don't go to anyone else with their problems. So it's just considering how, are you making that relationship mutually satisfying and mutually beneficial. So as a leader, you need to be continually showing that you care about your team, that you care about its progress, you care about the underlying issues. And obviously the first step is asking, but the second and probably more important step is really listening. So really trying to figure out what's going on for people. And just, ensuring that you have someone for support. Maybe it's outside of work, but having people that you can depend upon. So relationships, really important aspect of resiliency. And then the last one that I have is candor. And this is about, is your team able to have open, honest dialogue and feedback with each other? I talk about psychological safety a lot. I think it's really important. And that's that ability for team members to express and be themselves without, feeling that they're going to be embarrassed or blamed or ridiculed. And again, that's not always easy to do, because there's always that risk that if I say something, I might look stupid, and nobody gets up in the morning wanting to go to work and look stupid. But it is a really crucial factor in creating resilient teams. It's being able to discuss the elephant in the room. One way that I've seen to do this is to have candor breaks, where every team member is encouraged to share their thoughts and feelings. And any team member could call a candor break. You can break off into smaller groups or use breakout rooms if you were on a virtual meeting. And just be really candid and honest, to allow the team to really collectively identify and solve the challenges that they face. So that's something for leaders to be mindful of, is trying to create a norm or a culture where everyone is expected to challenge the status quo. Everyone is expected to come up with, okay, this is a really good idea, but why might it not work? And just doing that respectfully. It's not about putting other people down. It's just about trying to think of what are the possible risks or threats to an idea. And another piece here, especially for leaders, is feeling that you're able to have well-being conversations. And so that's basically, tapping into just, again, it's the how are you question, but going deeper than that, really figuring out how a person is doing. Because it's obviously more effective to manage potential problems with well-being sooner rather than later. If you think about your car, for anyone who drives, if you notice something's not quite right with it, you're better off going to a mechanic straight away rather than waiting until you're broken down on the side of the motorway. Prevention's always better than cure, and that's the same with well-being. So with these conversations, it's about, asking someone how they're really doing, and you might need to think, what do you need to prepare? Do you have the resources? Do you know where you can go to help? Maybe your company has an employee assistance program, an EAP. Do you have that? Do you know how they can access that? Just preparing yourself a little bit, and just really trying to keep an eye out for people's well-being. And going back to that car analogy, someone who's very experienced and familiar with cars will be able to tell that something's not quite right just by glancing at it or hearing something. Compared to, say, a new driver, they might not realize that something's wrong. And so that's the case with these well-being conversations. For a leader, you need to be, really looking and listening and trying to tune into how people are feeling, what's going on around you, and what's an important thing that you might be missing here. So it's really, really important to be listening and looking out for that. So for example, if someone is usually on a call and they're chatting away, and then for a whole week they're really quiet, they keep themselves on mute. If you're on a virtual call, they have the camera off, they're just really withdrawn. You have a choice there, whether to address that and say, hey, I've noticed that this has changed, what's going on, or you can choose to ignore it. So every leader has that choice there. And I suppose the candor piece is having the courage and the bravery to have those conversations and to just ask someone how they're getting on. Okay, so that is the 6 C's for building a resilient team. And as I said, I'd recommend you come together as a team and work on strategies that you want to implement, or beliefs that you want to hold as a team. One way to do this could be, say if you printed this out, and by the way, I'll make this available, everyone can download it, just so you have that framework. One way you could do is print it off, or create those headings, maybe with flip charts, and then come at it with post-it notes, so maybe you think, pair, share, where each team member thinks individually, comes up with what they'd like everyone to know, and then pair, have a discussion in a pair, and then share it with the wider group. So that's one way you can work on that. Or again, you can use it with Mural, which is a great online collaboration tool if you're not all based in the same area. But I'll just give a couple of examples, and again, I'll be sharing the slides, and you'll have the recording of this. So if you want to go back and review it, you always can. But say, for example, that first one, change, you might say, okay, what we want to do is have monthly reviews to look for ways to improve process X, or system Y, scheduling time in to look for improvements. Or thinking like a scientist, a scientist is constantly experimenting. They're trying to disprove things that we previously thought was true. So it's adopting that approach, trying to, look for ways to improve, keeping your team proactive, so that you're more likely to adapt to change. I'll zoom in on this in a second, but this is the circle of, circle of control and influence and concern. So some of you may have seen this before. I'll zoom in on it in a second because I know that's very small. But it's just identifying what's within your control, what's within your influence, and what is your circle of concern, things that you can't control, like the weather or if public transport is on time. Moving over then to challenge, what kind of beliefs or strategies do you want to have here? Again, it's recognizing that life won't always be easy, acknowledging as well those little wins. If you're facing a big challenge, it's celebrating that we're making tiny steps towards our goal rather than getting overwhelmed by the magnitude of a problem. Commit then, spend time defining what exactly your goal is and what it means and what's important to you. And then figuring out, steps to get there, because a goal without a plan is just a dream. So it's, figuring out what you value, what your clients depend on you, how can you commit to those. The connect piece, again, it's all about building relationships. So making time, for example, to talk to people about things other than work. The ways of working document that I just mentioned there, it's one that identifies how you like to work. For example, how you like to communicate with others, how you like to be managed, your personality, your interests, and so on. And that is something that I shared in February's Never Mind the Buzzwords. So that is up in a shared resource folder, and I'll be sharing that with everyone who registered for this. So you'll be able to see that again if if you missed it the first time. But if you do have any questions about how to access that, just get in touch. My email will be at the end of the session. I'll be sending out emails as well in relation to this. And candor again. So again, even putting it into the meeting agenda, time to challenge the status quo, right? Again, sometimes it's uncomfortable and it's unpleasant, but that is a way of really building that candor and that ability to challenge ideas and issues. So again, reminding everyone you need to show everyone respect, and regardless of if you agree with an idea or not. So you can see some of these that I've listed are strategies or actions. Some of them are more beliefs that you want to remind yourself of. So I would say it can be really valuable to get people to brainstorm, come up with as many as possible, and then consolidate those, so you can use that. I've just seen Veronica popped in the link to the shared resource folder. So you can find that ways of working document as well as this framework for the 6 C's. And just looking at the, yeah, thanks, Matthias. I'm glad that you find that useful. I think, yeah, I was trying to bring together all of the different areas of resilience. I'll just zoom in a little bit into that control piece, and then I'll stop talking for a minute and go allow you to go into breakout rooms if you want to. So with that control piece, again, it's just, you can see at the very center is the circle of control, my thoughts, my words, my actions. The circle of influence is the one on the outside there. So, other people's actions or other people's thoughts about me. And then on the very outside is the circle of concern, sports matches, the media. You can't control those. You can't control the amount of traffic, but you can influence what time you leave the house at. So you can influence how likely you are to get stuck in traffic. So again, just mindful of where you're spending your time and energy thinking about. Okay, so I would like to open up breakout rooms, and you don't have to go into a breakout room. I know that there may be people who need to keep on mute, but I'm sure that there is a lot of experience in the room, and I'd recommend, if you can, to just even pop in, go for a chat. We'll put you in for 8 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is just have a think about those 6 C's. Which is one that you would most like to work on? So maybe over the last few years or months, things have been changing and your team has sort of lost its way or its purpose. So you need to think about commit. Or maybe everyone in your team is very polite and kind, which is nice, but maybe issues aren't being openly discussed. So you think you might want to work on candor. And so have a think about, what might be the benefits of working on it, and what kind of obstacles do you think you might encounter? As I say, I'll open breakout rooms, but you don't have to go into them. You can just stay in the main session if you prefer. But these are just suggestions. If you go off topic, that's okay too. Maybe you'd like to share something that your team has done really well that has helped you become more resilient, and because that could be really helpful to share for other people in the group. So I think this topic really lends itself well to, learning from experience. So I'd like to invite you into those breakout rooms, and we won't be recording it. So I'm just going to pause that now, Gordon, for a second. So there's lots of different ways to keep in touch. If this is something that you're finding useful, we'll be putting the recording on our LinkedIn group, as well as our YouTube playlist. So, keep in touch with us on the LinkedIn group, or follow Jigsaw Better Business on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Eventbrite. You can join the mailing list. Those are all ways that you can get kept up to date. If you scan that QR code, you will be brought to all those different links so that you can make sure that you know when our events are going on. So I'll hang on for another few more minutes if anyone wants to chat about anything or ask any more questions. But for anyone who does have to drop off now, thank you so much for joining and for contributing. I hope to see you again on the 27th of April for our digitization session, or else on the 11th of May for that piece about the great retention. So trying to attract and retain the best talent. But take care, everyone, and I hope that you all have a lovely Easter and a nice long weekend. Thank you. And as I say, I'll share the topics, the slides and everything. And yeah, Mary, I just saw your comment there. It is possible. Yeah, we'll be sharing from last month's session. I'll share the recording or the slides for that. And the link for upcoming events, it should be, I think, in the chat if we scroll up a little bit. Yeah, so if you just scroll up a tiny bit, Mary, you'll see the 27th of April is that digitization piece, and then on the 11th of May is the great retention, so trying to retain our talent. So those links will be there for you, Mary, so hopefully you'll be able to join us again. And thank you, everyone, for the lovely comments. As I say, I'll hang on for another few minutes if anyone wants to chat about anything further, but if not, thank you very much for attending, and I'll hopefully see you at future events.